We did say we would, we did say that would be, um, we're gonna try to emulate MGS3, correct?
Yeah. I mean, that's what
All
I'd
right.
like to do.
I don't have any issue with that. I think it'd be pretty straightforward.
Over here.
Plus,
Over
again,
here.
it's the
Over here. Where
third
you at?
game at most. What you're just gonna probably run into is
Oh,
just
yeah.
gameplay differences and just a
Whoa.
slightly more cumbersome sort of
Whoa.
mechanics. But I think it'll be fine.
It's my fault.
The
It
story and
almost,
everything is basically the same, so you're not missing anything
it was
between
almost
Delta
my
and the
fault.
original.
Yeah.
So that's always a good. But yeah, we'll look into that emulation then and see what will come of it, basically. Let me see.
I mean, I hope we can figure something out regarding that.
Absolutely. Like I said, I don't doubt we could get it to work or anything like that. It would just be finding the right emulator and then just kind of running with it. Which again, thankfully, it is very straightforward in terms of like what to expect, what to do, and just general kind of things. Again, we're talking about a specific PS2, PS3 era game, so it's not going to be a big issue. Again, it's like I said, just finding the right emulator. I think would be the main thing. What is that fucking ache? Let me see what else. Okay. Sorry, I'm also just checking on something else here real quick. Okay. Okay. Let me see. So aside from the destruction there, okay. So when do you want to try for that episode? Next Saturday, or do you want to try something a little later? All right. Cool. We'll have a date for that. Hopefully nobody gives us any issue about, oh, why are you playing the
I mean, I think I'll...
And hopefully if, yeah, I mean, people are not that bitchy to begin with, but it is still annoying when you get people who are like, oh, it's not authentic, and my god, how dare you, and don't you know you're stealing money from the creators? It's like, oh, for God's sakes, it's like, oh no, we're not paying, $30 for an old ass copy of Metal Gear Solid 3. Oh no. What will Konami do?
What will they do? Think of the poor multi...
Exactly, it's not...
It's like...
Exactly. Again, they're not like Ubisoft that are like filing for bankruptcy. Ooh, I would... But yeah. Again, I think we'll be fine with it. And hopefully if the emulator works, then maybe we could find one for Portable Ops and Peace Walker. So technically both games are sort of required before we can tackle MGS5. But again, that's going to be for much, much later. Actually, do I need to do anything else with this? I'm going to do something fun, because why not? I've already done like an important image anyways. But yeah. Also, like I said, I don't think we'll be tackling the non-canon games. Simply because if we did all that, it would just be a huge fucking, what's it called? Like the amount of games in the Metal Gear series would have us doing this for years on end. And I do not recommend that at all. Especially when you got things like the Acid series, which, oh boy, where do I even begin with that? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head about that. But I remember that one of the... What was it? I remember that one of the antagonists, or like the main antagonist, is this gigantic man. Like, in full World War II Nazi regalia, basically. But he has a comically small head in comparison to the rest of his body.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
And I think the main... Oh yeah, like I said, there's a reason it's called Acid. It's basically just lunacy at the highest degree. Like the plot basically revolves on the idea of like a plane being hijacked mid-flight, and the attackers are revealed to be like a pair of puppets that claim that they'll crash the plane into like a building if they don't get what they want. So there's that. There's also the whole point that the the snake you're playing is not really what's the word? The snake you're playing is revealed to not actually be solid, so it's also kind of weird. It leans into the idea of like, oh, he actually is a clone of a clone, basically. The villains are also just absolutely weird. Like, even for Metal Gear standard, which already pushes the boundary of like, what the fuck is acceptable. We're talking about just absolute weird shit. Like, one of them is basically a gigantic beast man. Again, the aforementioned small-headed main villain. All this weird shit, basically. Again, it's really not recommended. That's all I can say. Unless you're willing to like take LSD to get the full experience, just skip it.
Alright, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. Kojima also wound up doing 2 other games for completely different projects within Konami. Specifically, he did Snatcher and Police Knots. Snatcher was an odd game because it has like implications that ties into the Metal Gear franchise. Let me see if I can remember it. Basically, the concept of Snatcher is Blade Runner, where essentially you're going down through this hyper-advanced city, looking for clues about an artificial intelligence or an android, basically, that's trying to start some sort of conflict across the world. And this thing like kills people by ripping their skin off and things like that. But when you shoot some of the androids they have, or like when you discover a quote-unquote snatcher, you discover that they actually have like synthetic skin that slowly peels away, revealing the robotic endoskeleton and all that crazy stuff. It's basically a game about hunting Terminators, essentially.
Oh my.
The interesting thing about it is that the game actually has a miniature companion that will come with you in a lot of these incidents and these events, which is actually, and I kid you not, a machine referred to as Metal Gear Mark II. And when you see it, you automatically are supposed to think of like the original nuclear launching weapon, but in reality it's this mini droid that walks with you, has a camera head and a small processor / TV monitor built into its arm, which is designed to help like you see things, basically, so it keeps you in communication with everyone. It's got a bit of a personality as well, which made it endearing for a lot of people at the time. So much so that Kojima actually brought the little robot back from Metal Gear Solid 4 as basically a proper mechanical assistance, let's call it. Again, the main thing was that Snatcher originally was supposed to take place in the Metal Gear universe, and this was kind of like Kojima's safeguard. If the Metal Gear franchise didn't succeed, then the idea was just that Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2 would be prequels to the Snatcher game, and then Snatcher would be the main series, with the events of Metal Gear having taken place so far in the distant past that nobody remembers Snake or Big Boss, basically. But when Metal Gear found out, when the reverse happened, basically Metal Gear was actually going to be, or was successful and was going to get more sequels, and Snatcher was considered the favorite. Kojima basically never brought back Snatcher, never really brought back any of the characters from it. He would keep some of the mechanical elements for the next Metal Gear games, but that was about it, basically. Which is an odd situation, but it makes the most sense. The other game he did was called Police Knots. And Police Knots is exactly as it sounds. It's Space Cop, essentially.
What is it
Excuse me.
all about?
Bear with me, because this one I'm going to have to work to remember, and I might get some of the information wrong. But I believe the concept was that humanity is leaving planet Earth for the stars, and the colonization efforts are kind of going underway. There's Earth, and then there's the space station that kind of hovers around Earth. You play a space detective, or a detective basically, who was one of the first astronauts to really like go into space with the like new rockets and things like that. However, it went wrong, and he wound up getting comatose for about, I think, 9 years roughly. So technology and everything has kind of advanced without him. He wakes up years later out of his coma into a world that's kind of changed and sort of different in every way, shape, and form. To the point where he's kind of lost and trying to keep up with everything that's going on in life, but still making the best of it. Now has a phobia of actually going into space to the point where he has to like stay in certain compartments of a shuttle just to avoid knowing that he's in space, basically. Policenauts was kind of, how do I put it? If Snatcher was supposed to be a Blade Runner sort of game set in the Metal Gear universe, Policenauts was basically supposed to be an old 70s anime set in own setting, basically. It was even called interactive cinema because it was much closer to an actual anime series than a proper game, at least in principle, I should say. It was more of a click adventure, basically. One of the characters, however, for the Metal Gear franchise would actually make an appearance in Policenauts. Excuse me. Which was actually supposed to be the girl called Meryl, who would later appear in the events of Metal Gear Solid 1 as one of the sidekicks to Snake during the mission itself. Here, basically, Meryl was introduced proper and, again, technically connects the events of Policenauts to Metal Gear in a strange fucking way. Again, like with Snatcher, the game was supposed to be set up as a sort of episodic series, basically, which would in turn kind of spawn off a Policenauts anime and maybe a franchise in its own right. Unfortunately, it only ever saw release in Japan and never saw much of an official North American release, which heavily hindered its sales at the time. Again, keep in mind that Japan was going through a lot of problems, including the game crashes and things of that nature. So, Policenauts was considered a bit of a financial failure for Konami, and they didn't go back to really work with it. For the life of me, I can't recall more of the plot of what originally happened. I'd have to get a refresher on both of these games, really. But that was basically the entirety of Policenauts' sort of core theme and element. It was just focused on space investigations, advanced technology, and just general stuff of that nature, basically. Again, once Metal Gear proved to be the more successful franchise, Kojima would just basically stick to that, what's it called? He would stick to that almost exclusively as much as humanly possible. But Konami would try to get him onto other games outside of Metal Gear to kind of keep him useful, because they thought, hey, maybe he can actually give us more of that crazy shit, basically. So they actually put him on the production of another game, well, a few games, I should say. Specifically, they put him in charge of the Castlevania Lords of Shadows game, which was basically supposed to be a reboot of the Lords of Shadow of the Castlevania franchise. And so Kojima did what he did best and tried to bring in what he learned from Metal Gear into Castlevania. But the problem was that basically he wanted to have a game that was more faithful to Castlevania and sort of tried to be like an entry to new players and things like that, similar to how he treats things with Metal Gear. But Konami didn't want that. They wanted him to completely reboot the franchise and change a huge swath of it, so he agreed. This is why things were changed, like Gabriel basically being the man who would become Dracula, a lot of the villains basically being reimagined and setting being worked. Just a lot of basic changes that would use the characters' names and locations and things like that, but would give it a completely different coat of paint in terms of story and personality and character. So Kojima was basically forced into that role. The Lords of Shadow 1 was successful enough that it did inspire a sequel, or at least 2 sequels, I should say. And just to be clear, people were critical of the game, but the gameplay was fun enough that it kept the game, did the sales well enough, and people kind of enjoyed it for what it was. It was an interesting little hack and slash. Let's just leave it at that. It would have 1 DLC, and that would be about it. At least a story DLC. Afterwards, Kojima would be put in charge of 2 other games in the franchise before eventually being removed from the Castlevania series by Konami to again focus on the Metal Gear franchise in a different way. The first one would be Castlevania Mirror of Fate, which was a DS game co-developed by Nintendo. This one was an attempt to reimagine some of the other elements from the previous games and sort of act like a bridge between Lords of Shadow to the next entry in the Lords of Shadow timeline. It mostly focused on Dracula's son Alucard when he was a human, then Dracula killing him and being told too late that he was his son, so he turns him, which then later focuses on Alucard's son, who comes in to stop everything with the Mirror of Fate, etc., etc. It sort of just acts as a retelling of the first Castlevania game, and that's about it. There was nothing really more to it. The characters were a bit more consistent with their original universe counterparts, but beyond that, there was nothing more that the game did that inspired quote-unquote confidence. Later, once that was done and completed, the Lords of Shadow 2 was put into production and then released later that year to critical fan negativity. Mostly for the reason being that they basically put you in the control of Dracula in the modern day. People just wanted to control Dracula during the age of like when he was a vampire in the medieval times, basically. The game would kind of jump back and forth between medieval and modern, but it was very clearly still set within the same time. It would try to rehumanize Dracula, recontextualize his battle against Satan of all things, and just basically was a gigantic mess. It was very clear by this point that Kojima knew this was not going to succeed. The franchise was just doomed, and so decided to end the Lords of Shadow in the second game and just leave it at that. So it was what it was. The second game it did as well as it could, again with critical flop that it was, and since then the Lords of Shadow timeline and concepts were never attempted by Konami again. Kojima was then moved to Metal Gear Solid 5, the Phantom Pain, and then would later work on Ground Zeroes. Konami would keep the Castlevania IP shuttered for a while until the Netflix series many years down the line. So that was kind of like the brief historic overview, at least in terms of what Kojima did. He did do one other game franchise which has been successful and people have wanted to see return, and that was called Zone of the Enders. Full disclosure, I have not experienced Zone of the Enders at all. My only experience with Zone of the Enders was, I believe the demo, I'm not entirely sure, during the days of the PlayStation 2, where me and my brother would witness the cutscenes, and like with the introductory cutscene, or I think something like that, where children were basically crushed under a giant mech, essentially. Yeah, that happens in the game, so I was a little traumatized by that.
Oh shit.
That's as
Sounds horrible.
Yeah, it's, again, I'm trying to recall it because it could be like a partial memory. I think it was basically like, if I remember correctly, you're on a colony, and the colony's being invaded by like the enemy nation, and the kids are trying to like be rebels and fight against them, but they get caught and you get separated from them, so they get tied up, and then I think either a bot gets destroyed and lands on them, or the main villain's like, fuck you, I'm gonna kill your friends in front of you, and then crushes them. We don't see it, but we see the blood pooling out, basically. So it's something to that effect. I just can't recall off the top of my head exactly what happened. It's been too many years, basically. But that was basically what I recall of the series. I also remember that the mechs in Zone of the Enders is by far the most provocative machines I've ever seen. Basically, and I'm not joking about this, you pilot the machine not through the head or the chest. You pilot it through its dick. Yes, I'm, again, I'm not kidding about this. There is a pronounced cod piece on the mech's body, and that is designed to be the main cockpit, and I emphasize the word cock in this, for the pilot to get inside and control the mech. It's kind of distracting, and again, you see it and you think to yourself, I am confused by this, this design. I would like to know who approved of this and why. Zone of the Enders basically had, I think, 2 games to its name. There was the first one on the PlayStation 2, and I think, I think there was like a few others. Can't recall. Hold on. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, no. So there was actually a few. So there was Zone of the Enders, like the main one, and then I think the other one was called Zone of the Enders Second Runner. Yeah, that was the next one that came out in 2018. So relatively recently. And then, Zone of the Enders Second Runner originally came out in the 2003 as a PlayStation 2, then got remastered and re-released in 2018. And then there was a Game Boy game which was called Zone of the Ender: The First Fist of Mars, and I believe an anime adaptation that came out some time later. So the franchise has had a tumultuous relationship, to say the least, with the gaming public as a whole. And it's mostly because, again, people know Kojima more for the Metal Gear franchise, and a lot of Zone of the Enders would actually influence part of Metal Gear Solid 2's development in terms of aesthetics, designs, and character concept art, basically. Ray would share similar design elements to the Ender mechs in question. Some of the enemies you would encounter would also have the similar kind of armor and color scheme to it, basically. So that became, it's kind of its legacy, really. I'm sure there are fans out there, but, this is a game outside my purview. I'm just kind of giving the best overview of what I remember and what I know. I could be completely wrong about most things, but, that's life. But like I said, mostly Kojima was just kind of kept on the Metal Gear franchise and just given complete creative control up until the events of PT happened and Metal Gear Solid 5 basically being his last game and also the game he had the least control over because of the fallout with Konami. Basically, from what I understood, it basically all happened because of PT. Originally, from what I understand, Kojima wanted to do things in PT that would push horror to its most absolute limits, essentially. This included the talking fetus, the wife who killed herself, a lot of like messed up and horrifying things, basically. And just like with Lords of Shadow, they gave him like free reign to do whatever the fuck he wanted for a period of time until they became overly protective of the Silent Hill IP. Because again, PT was supposed to be connected to Silent Hill, was supposed to reboot the franchise. This led to the massive falling out because Kojima was basically being controlled and they were overexerting their influence on Metal Gear Solid 5 and basically compromising what he wanted to do with the Phantom Pain. So this then led to the mass falling out between the two of them, the company and Kojima himself. So he would leave the company shortly after the completion or the partial completion of Metal Gear Solid 5, and this also led to PT's cancellation, simply because without Kojima, there was really nobody to focus the attention. On top of that, apparently he and Norman Reedus were very close, so Reedus refused to participate in the project if Kojima left. So this also then resulted in the company having to scout for a new lead, which basically would have costed them more money in the long run, essentially. Excuse me. Sorry, I don't mean to motor mouth that much.
No, I understand. I'm not feeling the best right now. I need something to get my mind off things.
Alright, do you want me to keep going, or?
Well, yeah, I'm just,
Oh, sure, okay. Sorry, what was I? Okay, right. So PT basically gets shit canned, for lack of a better term, and Konami basically gets super pissy with Kojima because he basically told them to go stuff themselves at that. So what they wound up doing during that time period was they wanted to prove that they could do their own Metal Gear without Kojima's involvement. And so this is what led to the creation of Metal Gear Survive, which basically was an attempt to, for lack of a better term, reboot the franchise and completely and utterly try to sever the Metal Gear franchise away from Kojima. Basically, Survive was going to be an alternate history story focusing after the events of Ground Zero, basically making it so that the Portable Ops, Peace Walker, and then the start of Ground Zeroes, or sorry, the start of Metal Gear Solid 5 was all canon, and then this game would take place and be the new canon moving forward. And that's where Survive started as a whole, where basically it was a project born out of spite and started with like this complete another like we're gonna prove to Kojima that we can do things on our own without his involvement. Um, and so they just slapped it together. They basically got someone who was like Kojima light, basically, and then tried to run with it. The problem is that, as you can imagine, well, actually, let me rephrase that. As it turned out, a lot of people on the team were actually loyal to Kojima themselves. Those who left the company with Kojima went to found, Kojima Productions. But those who stuck around with Konami never agreed with what Konami did, and so began to act as basically rebel infiltrators to ensure that Konami would not succeed in what they were trying to do. So they basically would put in stuff and small jabs and Easter eggs and references to everything else, basically. This eventually led to Metal Gear Solid Survive not going as intended, mostly because, again, a lot of the systems were just taken from the Ground Zeroes / the Phantom Pain with no further alteration or clarification. On top of all this, the game itself was basically ridiculed by people and fans alike. Fans absolutely rejected this because, hey, you've fucked over Kojima, so fuck you. We're not going to do that. And what's it called? What's the word I'm looking for here? And it was not a fun game in the slightest. It was essentially a massive fucking grind to get through a lot of the level. They tried to make it survival, but leaned super hard into the survival aspect. We're talking things like you have to purify water. You just can't drink it as it is, so you have to waste resources on that. Your character gets tired pretty frequently. You have to eat food very whenever possible. Just a lot of terrible design decisions that led to the game's complete and utter betrayal of everything that was Metal Gear. On top of the alternate reality timeline that they tried to make canon. In the end, Survive not only bombed so spectacularly, it freaked Konami enough to actually put this franchise on the shelf, and even Kojima himself mocked the company for essentially not understanding Metal Gear and mocked them for everything.
yeah. Oh fuck, the game crashed.
Oh shit. But yeah, it basically what's the word? It basically just destroyed a lot of what Konami wanted to do, and again wanted to. I'm trying to think of the right word here. Try to do and create, basically. And it was rather telling. It was rather impressive to see this whole thing unfold and really kind of see really see this thing all fall apart, basically.
Yeah.
But it's not too surprising. Let me see here. I'm sorry, I'm just checking something real quick. My apologies. But that's, you know. Hold on, sorry, I'm just checking something else. But yes. That was basically the whole situation, the whole point of this problem, and basically what kind of proves that, again, Konami has never really understood its IPs. It's even worse with Silent Hill. I can only speak on my experiences from classic games and then what happened with the stuff under Tom Hewlett, aka the Ken Penders of Silent Hill. Excuse me.
Ken Penders of Silent Hill.
Yeah, basically, how do I put it? Tom Hewlett basically, for lack of a better term, he wanted to. Okay, let me put it this way. He was a Silent Hill fan who basically got an opportunity to work at Konami and start developing games within the company itself. He basically began to what's the word? Sorry, I'm trying to think of the right word here. He basically tried to change Silent Hill because he wanted Silent Hill to be more like the second game. He hated the aspects of the supernatural, cult, everything about that, basically. And so, in his own words, he wanted Silent Hill to be about psychological horror instead of the supernatural. So, every game he's ever created has just been a reattempt at redoing Silent Hill 2 over and over again. We're talking about reimaginings, okay, let me put it this way. Literally every game he's created can be summed up as the following. Protagonist has amnesia. Protagonist goes to Silent Hill. Protagonist encounters Pyramid Head clone. Protagonist discovers shocking truth about his origin, or something of that nature. Protagonist realizes that Twist actually defines them, and due to extreme pressure of the incident, created PTSD amnesia that makes them forget.
Yeah.
Protagonist now has to.
Hi, Spartan Joe 193. He just says "we" in the chat. So sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to.
You're good. You're good. Hello, welcome to the chat. Protagonist then makes choice whether to be good boy or bad boy. End credits. There's literally the entire plot for Silent Hill Homecoming, Silent Hill Origins, Book of Lost, Shattered Memories, and Silent Hill Downpour. All 4 games have the same plot for all of them, and each one of these games brought back diminishing returns at every point. To the point where, essentially, Tom was rightfully ridiculed by a lot of fans for the shit he's been trying to do. Homecoming, he basically was like, oh, I'll do a cult story, and then made the cult completely and utterly uninteresting. He then tried to retcon the events of Silent Hill and tried to change the cult into something else, but it didn't really work, and mostly because Konami was forcing his arm and telling him to be as accurate to the source material as possible, but he still found ways to basically fuck up the origins of like everything in Silent Hill, and it just continued from there. They also wanted to do a spiritual revival, like a remaster of Silent Hill 1, and so they went out of their way to commission Nintendo to help them build a Wii game, which was the Shattered Memories, and Tom used that as an excuse to basically retcon the history of like the town and Alessa and Sherry and all the shit into basically being, oh, she's just traumatized and made up a fantasy about her dad going into the town to save her from a cult. He actually died from a car crash, and she's just been repressing it. This whole game is about that, basically. And it's just been a constant downhill spiral at every possible turn. The man was essentially just anti-Silent Hill formula, or he was like he was an anathema to Silent Hill so badly that he was responsible. I would say for almost every single bad decision that Silent Hill suffered. Like its identity crisis is largely due to Tom Hewlett and his what's the word? Tom Hewlett and his um, what's the word here? I'm trying to say clearly. Um, Essentially, he's been responsible for like the identity crisis that Silent Hill has, and how badly the franchise has been suffering because of him. His legacy, essentially, that is of ruin and destruction. The last game he released was the Book of Lost Memories, and even that was just more like just trying desperately to do something, essentially. Since then, Silent Hill hasn't been able to recover from the damage he's done. It's just been a constant parade of the same thing. The worst thing he's ever done was the remaster of the Silent Hill collection. And basically, he basically took it upon himself to absolutely try to inject his retconning even further. Basically, his goal was to do a Silent Hill remake for 1, 2, and 3 in the HD remaster. So basically, new cutscenes, new stories, new everything. Konami wasn't going to do that. They said that, no, you're not going to get that kind of budget. You're just remastering the games, remaster the games. So he went behind... No, sorry, let me rephrase that. He didn't go behind their backs, but he decided to do something different and then tried to essentially hire the voice actors to come back in, reprise their roles, and then change the context of the story to better fit what he had mentally envisioned. So he took away Heather's, from the third game, he took away Heather's more independent nature and more like overcoming her traumas to become stronger, to just basically being a bratty teenager that swears every time. You know, the Vizzy Pop treatment, basically.
Vizzy Pop.
Yes. Absolutely. It's almost as if it was written by the same person. On top of that, then there was the whole fuck up and scenario with Silent Hill 2 and 1, and like I said, he was just ruining everything about it. On top of that, the issue was that there was no master copy, and he was in charge of trying to fix the audio, and he didn't, which led to all sorts of fucking problems. We're talking like textures not being in the right places, the fog being condensed down and removed, revealing a lot of things that weren't supposed to be seen. Again, going back to the textures, characters having their textures broken. There's an infamous scene where basically you see one of the characters who's supposed to die, and when the screen zooms in her face, her teeth are gone from her mouth, and the texture for her teeth are where her right eye should be, resulting in this like disturbing visual image that's not supposed to be there. And it was just the same problem all over the place. This complete HD remastering project was his biggest mistake, because again, he tried so hard to force Konami to give him the budget to remake all 3 of the games the way he wanted it. And so that money that should have gone to remastering things and, you know, quality testing and all that shit, got completely and utterly wasted because of his stupid demands. On top of that, the arguments with like the whole the royalties that some voice actors had and shit like that, he purposely ensured that it got worse, and just all this sort of like problems and issues. Again, like I said, Tom Hewlett really is the Ken Penders of Silent Hill, because they are almost identical in terms of attitudes and their shit in general.
Yeah.
And I'm not even surprised in the slightest. Hold on, sorry, I'm just checking. Hold on, sorry, I'm just checking something. Like I said, it just becomes this whole problem, and again, like I said, Tom Hewlett is just, like I said, he just caused a lot of issues, a lot of problems. People just weren't, people weren't putting up with it at all, and you can see the only problem.
Yeah, so that's why we don't get a new Silent Hill game.
Well, we did get like a new Silent Hill, and that was in the form of. We didn't get one until recently. That was Silent Hill. I think it was called F. Yes, Silent Hill F, and I don't know what's going on in this game. I stopped caring about Silent Hill way back in the day. Again, I followed the shit with like some of it because I was interested. Because at the time when I was growing up, Resident Evil and Silent Hill were like the two main horror franchises I was following religiously, and because there was such a beautiful dichotomy. We're talking about man-made bioweapons on one side and supernatural abominations on the other. The perfect, blend of shit. But since then, I didn't bother with the franchise. I kind of gave up on a lot of it. Once I realized that Team Silent wasn't around anymore, I just kind of gave up on a lot of it. So I never bothered with the events of Silent Hill F, nor do I know what's happening. All I understand is that it's now focused on Japanese horror and folklore, apparently, and the protagonist is. If I'm looking at the screenshots correctly, the protagonist can apparently turn into an okami at some point, like a wolf yokai, and cause issues. That's it. And I'm looking at all this, I'm thinking, it's like, what does this have to do with Silent Hill at all? What is this game?
Doesn't sound much fun.
It's odd, and I'm not bothering with this one simply because, again, I think I've moved on from Silent Hill, like just completely and utterly. I'm just done.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, it doesn't seem like there'd be any reason to come back to it anyways. I mean, to the new games.
Yeah. Again, it's like, why even bother with the new games? Why even bother with like any of it really? Because again, Team Silent disbanded many years ago during the events of Silent Hill 4. Like they wisely said that there was nothing else in the Silent Hill franchise that they could do or wanted to do, and they just left it alone. The story was wrapped up with Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill 4 was basically an epilogue to everything. And that was it. They wanted nothing to do with it but Konami. Team Konami just wanted to do more. They wanted to continue with their franchise, and again hired the Ken Penders of their company to do what he did. And so, we see what we see here. It's essentially the same problem with Konami, and it just becomes this huge, colossal mess where you just can't really escape it. And by escape it, I mean like dealing with the problems that it came with. Things like, what's the word? The Silent Hill, its weirder aspects, its elements. Oh god, I'm trying to think of the right word here. Just all the problems that it generates, basically. Let's just leave it at that. Which is insane because, again, this is coming from someone who's witnessed the rise and the fall, who's witnessed Silent Hill's heights, and then witnessing its failures and its collapses and all these general kind of like problems, basically.
Yeah.
Just, it just becomes a serious, like, how do I put it? It just becomes a serious problem at the end of the day, and you really can't ignore it, for lack of a better term. It just becomes a serious issue. A serious issue that becomes more prevalent, more abundant, especially when you have a franchise that's just running on empty, basically, for lack of a better term. It is, how do I put it? Bear with me a second.
No, that's okay.
It becomes almost impossible for you to... Excuse me?
It's okay, I understand. Wait, can you hear me? Rev?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I'm just writing something. Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
It becomes almost impossible to, like, refocus and re-examine things in anything. You know, it becomes a problem with, like, long-running franchises. You know, when the goal or the idea has already been reached, where can you go? How far can you think? The only way you can do a successful franchise with, what's the word? A successful franchise with what you have, or what you've been able to create, has to be something that has, like, focus on the world, a focus on the universe. Again, Mass Effect, it's the story of Shepard for a certain degree within, like, the Reaper War and everything like that, but it's not sole focus of Mass Effect. There's the rest of the universe all over the place, obviously. So, you know, there's a bit more wiggle room, there's a bit more leeway. You can kind of get around with everything that's being shown to you, basically. You know, like, Shepard isn't the sole focus of Mass Effect, you've got a lot that you can work with. And so there is this sort of, like, work you can do, for lack of a better term, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think I know what
You know,
mean
like...
by that.
Thank you. Again, Shepard is not sole focus, and we can see it.
The Vantage seems to have left timed bombs by here. I recommend planting one of these inside of the Vantage lid.
Sorry, I'm just writing something up. So, we kind of have that idea, we kind of have that experience, and that's what really works. But when you have a series whose entire goal and focus is, what's the word? Entire goal and focus is more on, what's the word? Goal and focus is more on, like, a set character, a set group. You have a very clear protagonist, and there's nothing else to it, right? You start to see the problems with that kind of franchise and kind of focus, because the focus will always be on that character, on that universe, on that setting. And there's no way to kind of get away from it. Again, like, take the Sonic franchise, for example. Sonic is the main protagonist, and the story is all about him. So naturally, you can't really do a franchise that is outside of Sonic's, like, enclosed, what's the word? Enclosed circuit, for lack of a better term. You know, like, as much as we would like to enjoy it, it's always kind of, what's the word? It's always going to go back to Sonic. It's always going to go back to the main protagonist that he is and all that sort of stuff. But one of the biggest things, or one of the biggest issues, I think, is just that the focus will always be upon that character and that, what's the word? That character and everything about it, basically. But sorry, I'm grasping at words here. Let me refocus. Okay, got it. Again, this is the problem when you have a setting that's more focused on a singular character and what the character has to offer other than the universe and the setting itself. Again, I've mentioned Sonic. Another example would be Devil May Cry, and how that's really just focused on the Sparta family and the Sparta, and Dante as well. Basically, even though the story has shifted towards Nero, he's still related to Sparta, and so it still sticks with that character. You know, the universe has not really, the world has not really had a chance to change or evolve or really grow. And while there is enough open room for another Devil Hunter to take the center stage, we've had so many years with, what's it called? With Dante that it just becomes almost impossible to see the setting outside of Dante's immediate peripheral or control, really. That's where the biggest problem, I think, comes from, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Hold on. Sorry. Hold on. Sorry, I'm just reading something here. Bear with me a second. Alright. I'm just checking that as well. I just needed to see if there was anything else in that setting. It's like, no. It is just basically Metal Gear, just the focus on Dante and the whole setting as well. Whereas something like Resident Evil that has a bit more wiggle room where you can really focus on the characters. Hell, we've had multiple Resident Evil games that have been out there that's really focused on other characters, not just Chris Redfield, Joe Valentine, Claire Redfield, and Leon. You know, we've had games that have focused on Ethan Winters, obviously, protagonists from Dead Aim, Survivor, technically Umbrella Chronicles, if we want to get technical. Operation Raccoon City, that's another good example of like stories focused on other characters. There is a lot out there within Resident Evil, and I think that's what leads it to have its staying power as it is. But again, you know, your guess is as good as mine, I would say. Actually, before I continue, I did want to ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Did you ever consider playing the Resident Evil games at all, or do you think it's too weird?
I kind of find it somewhat weird, but you know, we played the Revelations.
So not your alley. Right. Well, I meant more like the original like games and things like that, because again, I know that if you want to use something like the emulators, I think you could get around like things like what's the word? Resident Evil, you know, Operation Raccoon City not being available to Capcom, basically having to make some changes. But you know, that's just me. Again, something else to consider. We never did Revelations 2, so I guess that could probably work. Let me see here. Check that. Oh shit, I didn't realize how late it was. Do you mind if I head off here? I do have work in the morning,
it's okay,
unfortunately.
I understand. I'm tired too.
Alright, then we'll call it here. Alright, I'll see you tomorrow then.
See ya.
Good night.
Good night. Okay. Hold on, man. I don't know. I mean, it was fun to kind of play Halo, but I kind of want to work on a few things before I go to bed. Thanks for